Senator Fifield.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I also rise to take part in the debate on the motion to take note of answers by Senator Carr to questions from Senator Abetz. Mr Deputy President, although I'm a Victorian senator, I actually feel well qualified to take part in this debate. I used to work in the New South Wales government, I used to work in the New South Wales Parliament, and I used to work for a government that was led by a good, decent and honest Premier in Mr Nick Greiner. And I did work for that outstanding Minister, Mr Bruce Baird. And I did have the opportunity, Mr Deputy President, to observe closely then Mr Carr and the way that New South Wales Labor operates. And you might recall, Mr Deputy President, a fellow by the name of Rex Buckets Jackson, who was a minister in a government in which Mr Carr himself served. And Mr Jackson was the Corrections Minister in New South Wales.
Point of order, Senator Brown.
As much as I'm very interested in the CV of Senator Fifield, I don't think that was part of Senator Bob Carr's responses today. So if you could bring him back to order, that.
Thank you, Senator Brown. I will remind Senator Fifield of the matter before the chair.
And I'm coming to the point. But anyway, he went to jail for selling early releases as a prison minister for prisoners. But we're always told, Mr Deputy President, that these are aberrations, that these are isolated instances, that they don't go to the very heart of the culture of the New South Wales Labor Party. And Mr Deputy President, Mr Carr used to stride New South Wales as some sort of political colossus, and so I must say it did bring a smile to my face when Senator Carr on Four Corners, in reference to Eddie Obeid, said that he was, and I quote, a marginal figure, someone living in the corridors, never to be taken seriously. Mr Deputy President, that's the old Deirdre Chambers defence. You might recall Bill Hunter in the movie Muriel's Wedding, when he was the mayor of Porpoise Point, walking into a restaurant and his mistress, Deirdre Chambers, was there. He saw her and he said, oh, Deirdre Chambers, what a coincidence. We're meant to believe that every time Bob Carr had any association, was even in the same room as Eddie Obeid, it was, Eddie Obeid, what a coincidence, fancy seeing you here. They were cheek by jowl. And Mr Carr, he chooses to ignore the method, the manner, the when of the appointment of Eddie Obeid to the front bench. He prefers to say, it was actually Mr Yemmer who gave him a special status. It was Mr Carr who first appointed Mr Obeid as a Minister of the Crown. And you know whenever Mr Carr is under pressure, because he always reaches for some sort of Chairman Mao story. And we saw that on Four Corners. We saw that on Four Corners, where he said, no, forget about how Eddie Obeid was appointed. Let me tell you about how I took on the Terrigals. Let me tell you about when I had Eddie Obeid in my office and I pushed him out of the ministry. I got so frustrated I had to reach for my Chairman Mao jar, which held my pencils and pens, and I threw it against the bookcase. And, oh boy, I tell you, go and see Barry O'Farrell, book an appointment with Barry, and if you go into the office, you'll still see the bookcase and you'll still see the nick out of the bookcase that the shattering jar caused. That's part of the Bob Carr MO, Mr Deputy President.
Carr.
That's part of the Senator Carr MO, is come up with a colourful story to distract attention. But it was, in fact, Mr Carr who appointed Eddie Obeid as a minister, and Eddie Obeid served as a minister in that government in 1999, in 2000, in 2001, in 2002 and 2003. This was no short-term sojourn on the front bench. This was 5 years as a Minister of the Crown, courtesy of Mr Carr. But 1999 wasn't actually the first time that Mr Carr tried to appoint Mr Obeid to the front bench. He tried in 1995. He backed Mr Obeid over the then frontbencher or opposition frontbencher, Mr Bob Martin, and it's part of New South Wales Labor folklore that the vote was split at 22-all. 22-all between Mr Obeid and Mr Martin, and the name ended up being drawn not out of a hat because they couldn't find one. They put the two names in a briefcase. Mr Martin's name was drawn out and Eddie didn't get to be a frontbencher. But Bob Carr, as early as 1995, was fighting to have Eddie Obeid in his ministry. But he eventually He eventually got there. He got there as the Minister for Minerals and Fisheries. Let's not forget Ms Harrison, Gabrielle Harrison, who was dumped to make way for Mr Obeid, so he could become the Minister for Minerals and Fisheries. He was known as Mr Coal and Mr Fish. Mr Deputy President, Bob Carr has been cheeked by a jowl. He stands condemned. He is not a credible figure to be our foreign